I struggled with the title of this for a while. It was reconstructing, but I didn't want you to think I was a social constructionist. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm not, okay? And I came to restoring the bridal chamber from the mundane to the spiritual. I want you to know that I took the bridal chamber term from the Gospel of Thomas. And I specifically took that as sort of the marriage, the spiritual marriage, but in the sense, in the spiritual religious sense that is from the Gospel of Thomas, which of course is not really part of the standard religious doctrine and so forth. But it's a title that I'm going to explain through this, so I'm going to stop right now. But I want you to know that when I talk about the bridal chamber, I use the term bridal chamber and marriage, okay, interchangeably, all right? Okay, and please feel free to ask questions as they arise. All right. Okay. If you can just, yeah. I'm going to begin with some statistics on marriage, but I'm going to go very quickly, as I know that many of you already know many of these statistics. But it's important for me to give you that as some of the stimulation for some of my ideas, or the reasons why I even think there needs to be new thinking amongst us as to how to treat couples problems or think about marriage. As you all know, today, I'm going to stand here just for a second, but the average length of today's marriage is 7.5 years. And let me also say, forgive me to some of you where this is, the lecture is really oriented on some level to a North American, population or idea of marriage. Although I do know, as I've done searches, that some of this resonates with other cultures and countries, but of course not completely. But the average length of today's marriage is 7.5 years. Shocking. Okay. That's a long marriage. When I was young, I used to think of long marriage was 30 years and, congratulations. And now you hear someone 10 years, it's a pat in the back and, hey, how'd you do it? That's great. Okay. Overall, 50% of all marriages end in divorce today. Okay. 30% of people today elect to live in a traditional marriage. What that simply means in the literature is a legal obligation to each other and children. The decision to have children. There is an increase in single parenting, and common to throughout history is the more sophisticated the culture, there is a decline in national birth rate. Okay. In 1996, the proportion of women aged 30 to 34 who had never been married was 20.5%. This was, it was actually 6% in 1970, so it was more than 3 times higher. Just let me go through a few more statistics. Number of unmarried couple households increased from one unmarried couple per household to 100, okay, in 1970, to 7, 1 to 7, excuse me, in 1996. So 1 out of 100, forgive me, it increased more to 7 out of 100. 7% of women ages 15 to 44 today cohabitate rather than marry. This is a 7% rise, which is actually a 40% increase from the time that they began to collect these statistics. Okay? Okay. What's also very clear is although many marriages end in divorce today, people are getting married at the same moment in many ways. Okay? There are a lot of different living styles, and although marriages have decreased, to some degree, what is really going on is that the look of marriage has changed. So today, most adults still want love, their love relationships to end in marriage. Despite these facts, the statistics show that U.S. residents are, at least they're not as in a hurry to get married. And actually, the age has increased for males and females in terms of what is the age at which people begin to marry. Okay. Basically, let me say that for women it rose from 20. No, for women it's 20 to 25 years, and for men 23 to 27 years. Okay. All right. And basically, which I know you all know, but the younger you marry, the more likelihood of divorce. Okay. Oops, we have to, no, there's an important slide for that. That's okay. Can we go to the previous? Yes, great, thank you. Now, let me summarize this and tell you it's not definitive, but I did a fairly extensive look at the literature and across a number of different domains, okay? Demographic domains, legal domains, social science, and so forth, and to evaluate what are some of the conclusions that right now, researchers, practitioners, and so forth are making from this phenomenon as we enter into the 21st century. These are some of the factors that psychosocial development, a lack or a lack of it, influences people's ability to handle marital stress. I think most of us don't have too many problems with that, right? That's a relevant factor. And their everyday living problems, okay. There is also now a lot of literature on values of and interests, okay. Similarity of values and interests between marriage partners buffers the couple against marital stress and problems. Third, the degree to which partners in a marriage are able to provide each other with contributions to the marriage that they find that would be difficult for themselves to provide, okay, raises the probability of the perception of benefits to the marriage. Oftentimes, one of the things that I use when I work with couples, not as sort of just my primary idea of marriage, but marriage oftentimes is perceived as a cost-benefit model, an economic model, as we all know. And if the costs outweigh the benefits just slightly, that teeter-totter switches, right? There are problems in that marriage, and usually we get a phone call. That's when we get a phone call. As long as the perceived benefits are outweighing the costs, the couples are relatively happy, and they can buffer the everyday living problems. Okay. Then finally, which is really, you're going to find, already, I know that you've probably seen this, there's a lot of literature on perceived inequity, which has a lot to do with gender issues in marriage. Okay. So perceived inequity in status and power between marriage partners leads to stress and conflict that increases the likelihood of their divorcing. Okay, we go to the next slide, because this is really why I'm here today. Okay. To address what I perceive, and let me also say that this is in the context of, people, many people's thinking throughout history, philosophers, social scientists, and so forth, that led me to some of these ideas and conclusions that I perceive to be one of the major problems as to why we keep, rising to the point of our incompetency, especially in the situation of marriage, okay, is that it has to do with marriage as a social idea, a social remedy. Whether most people know it or not, they enter into what they may think is a religious sacrament, whatever is according to their values and preferences, but they enter into it as a remedy. Somehow, it's going to do something more for them, whether it's economic, whether it's a social network, having children. I know all of you know this, especially those of you who are treating couples. You'll hear these ideas come out. Okay, so the problem with the conclusions is they rise from a construct of marriage as a social remedy to religious, social, economic, and political problems. Now, I'm going to talk about three premises that I make that are threads for the rest of the talk before I get into a brief I didn't spend a brief time on it because I actually love what I'm about to talk to. It's so interesting. But the historical evolution of marriage, okay, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about after I discuss the three premises. Okay, why I think this is a problem is premise one. Marriage as a social remedy confines and restricts marriage to what the existentialists call the unwelt phenomenological area of experience, the natural, physical, public world of the mundane, everyday living. That deprives marriage of transcendent meaning and purpose. Two, marriage as a social remedy assumes man and woman to differ fundamentally from one another. This embeds the bridal chamber and its partners in experiences that deceive and deprive them of authentic existence. Three, the bridal chamber cannot, in an existential term, become itself a phenomenological set of beliefs and aspirations where couples can synthesize willfully the natural and public world into a pattern of existence that refers itself to transcendent values.
Can you explain that third point?
Yes. Okay. In existential thinking, okay, there are realms of all of our experiences in life that are all very important. But they're important in the way that they interact, integrate with each other, consider each other, okay, in the experiential world. So the one area, the area of experience that I believe social remedy comes out of, okay, and is the area called the Umwelt, which is basically the world we're living, everyday life. The natural considerations that, and let me just restrict this right now to marriage. A division of labor, gender equality, right? Power and status, how do you raise your children, parenting issues, dealing with the practical issues of everyday living, which is extremely important. And sometimes couples, and I have found this, I want to get through this, but I, so many anecdotal things, and I'd love for you to share your own, as to couples verbalize a lot of this. Why do you love? Well, many people come up with the deeds of love. And when you say, okay, let's put those deeds away at the everyday, mundane world. Why do you love? I just do. It's very hard to describe why people love, other than loving considered through a social remedy. Does it help? All right. And I'll explain. I hope it comes more clear. Yes.
Definitions of this term, transcendent values.
Yes. I didn't hear. I know transcendent. I missed the first part. What?
Did you give some definitions of the term transcendent values?
Yes. Would you mind? I'd love to. Would you mind? Because if you would just hold on to that just for a second, because I am going to give a model that describes that. Okay? Thank you. All right. Now I want to briefly go to something that I find fascinating as my mind was just as I read all this and saw how this led to much of the phenomena we experience today in marriage. It became fascinating to see in the institution of marriage, much of what happens in life is we repeat history. Okay. So let me just briefly go through an historical analysis of marriage and how we came to think about marriage, okay, as an institution throughout history. I want to begin with the Roman bridal chamber, what I call the Roman bridal chamber. Okay. Romans, of course, as we all know, were very complex, and which really contributed to their genius and also to their demise. There were several things about Roman, the nature of the Roman person, that really led to some very sophisticated constructions, okay, as a result of their brilliance. Romans embraced, believe it or not, humanism. I know many of you probably know that. And they were very influenced by Stoicism at that time, as well as pragmatics. These were three ideas that the Roman philosophers discussed heavily. Okay. And this contributed to the evolution of marriage, the bridal chamber, from the Roman Republic, okay, to throughout their decline. And what they produced was a bridal chamber and a ceremony that actually is almost identical to the ceremony that we have today in North American culture. Okay. Along with divorce, separation, and marriage laws that we still enact. Okay. Let me just briefly go on to the 4 key areas that I highlighted in my review, and as I said, it wasn't even definitive, but I think they're key in leading to the idea of changing marriage throughout Roman culture. Let me say the idea of Roman humanism was interesting. Although they loved to conquer, and we all know they were extremely brutal, they could be aggressive and brutal, right? They had a humanistic quality. They were quite intellectual. So when they captured their slaves, what they did is educate them. Especially the slaves who became slaves to the household of magistrates, senate, okay, and so forth. So the slaves became doctors. They became very important figures in the Roman household, to the point where, and I want to make this brief, it's very interesting, but to the point where the head of the household could do whatever he wanted with, the death benefits. And oftentimes he favored the slave. It wasn't the slave and not the wife. So I'm building up a story for Roman woman's threat. Okay, at this point. So slavery was very influential during this time. Let me also add something. Many of the captured slaves were very pretty women. And so I'm going to now go down to the third idea. Roman women, not only the head of the matriarch of the household, okay, not only have to contend with the acceptance of bisexuality in the day, that the master may favor what in the literature they call the handsome cupbearer, okay? The master might also favor now the beautiful slave. So Roman women increasingly felt a threat to their inheritance. Let's go to the second one, the marital dowry. Okay. The marital dowry was also a phenomenon in Roman culture that influenced the shaping of marriage throughout Roman history. The marital dowry, of course, in early Roman history, especially during the Republic, women were really basically chatting. The father decided who they were going to marry, right? And it was usually a bloodline marriage, or to keep money within the family lines, okay? And there was a great dowry given. But the practical nature of the Romans started when they started having, women and men were having conflicts as women and men do, that the father said, hey, we've got to put our dowry to good use. We're given this kind of dowry, and he may run off or she may run away, and now we have to give another dowry again. We've got to figure out something practical where this doesn't go. Okay? So what they did is they developed a law in terms of the marital dowry, that if for any reason there was dissension in a marriage, at the beginning of Roman history, it was usually dissension verbalized by the man. But now it could be verbalized by the woman. Okay. So if any complaints come and there's going to be a dissolution of this marriage, the dowry is returned to the woman's father. Okay. So he's not giving dowry now for tons of other marriages. Now, as you can all imagine, I know where you're going. Okay. What this led to is, the most important thing out of all of this is that now, and this was after the Republic, okay, now at the hands of a woman, divorce could happen. Okay. So this combined then, let me go finally to the rest and then integrate so we can move on. Roman women, much like the Roman men, they had had the same Roman nature, okay, as the culture. They were aggressive. So throughout history, there's evidence, okay, that when they were never allowed to ride on a horse. They were only supposed to have, I can't remember at this point, but like a piece of gold is no more. They weren't going to be given power. Roman women rose up against these assaults. Female slaves, okay, inheritances going through people who weren't even really Roman, and they rose up and what I call, they conducted sort of a lysistrata. Okay, what they did is they went to the Senate and blocked the doors and refused passage, okay, until some of these laws were changed. Hadrian was emperor at this time, and Hadrian had the sophisticated task, but also he did not know the kind of problem that was going to come about, is that he now had to put his energy into the task of coming up with divorce laws, marital law, separation laws, and lo and behold, I'm going to go on, it's a little bit more complex, but out of this came a marriage ceremony, woman's choice and a man's choice of who you want to marry. Okay, it doesn't have to be in the bloodline. You could get divorced at your own hand. Women got property from this point on. And I want to read you something briefly. Juvenal, the poet, he had in his sixth satire, I think it conveys very clearly at the end of the Roman Empire what all of this led to in the increasing illusion of polarization between man and woman. Let me read this. Okay. Excuse me. Forgive me. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Okay. If a man wants a chaste wife, he must be mad. For a woman will try to run his money, friends, and even his slaves. She'll try to gossip with very important men, and will, if literary, act superior. Will even take as lovers, actors, musicians, even eunuchs, and pretend to be jealous to conceal her own adultery. Okay, let's move on. Okay. The medieval Reformation, another very important time in history, okay, for marriage. I'm going to try to rush, I know, because it's not my nature. Okay, let me simply say this. Sexuality and sexual sin contributed to an earthly construction of marriage. At this time of the Reformation, briefly, the clergy, okay, did not have hold over marriage. That was not their domain. And in fact, they were very upset because clergy married freely, and property did not stay within the church. The clergy had to come up. Oh, at this time also there was a lot of prostitution, okay, because of course there was tremendous poverty. So these two issues led to a construction of what the church called the spiritual marriage, a marriage to Christ, and the earthly marriage, which was the marriage of Adam and Eve after the fall. Men and women basically had to take this lower status, and therefore Procreation was a result of this fallen status. Briefly, what this led to was that now clergy, you're not of Adam and Eve, you're married to God. And therefore, you cannot marry or give property outside. To make a long story short, so we can move on. We can move on. This is how they eliminated clerical marriage, and it shaped the bridal chamber. And then industrialization, just let me move on. Developmental idealism, which continues out today. And in the 19th century, late 19th century, the developmental idealism, development, right? It's okay to develop. Development is unending. There's no limitations to development. And of course, as you know, this is going to influence most social institutions. Okay. The modern family and couples were influenced by the same idealism. You can attain whatever wealth you want. The partners of a marriage should attain, an endless development and so forth. So while I'm none of this I'm saying is bad, I'm certainly saying there has consequences to it that led to where we are today. The problem here is a little bit what happened in Rome. Men still dominated the public workspace, and what happened was women said, hey, we have this developmental idealism also, but it's not realized in everyday life. And so what the women did is they they came forward as marital litigants. And if you have after the talk, if you want to know a fascinating quote on this issue, I'll let you know. But marital litigants suing for support, custody of children, and separation rights. We can go on. And of course, this increased the tensions of the bridal chamber. And what this did, which is my main premise, is the bridal chamber increasingly became social remedy for everyday living problems. I can give you this slide later. I'd like to take my name. Is that all right? Okay, you get the idea. Okay. I feel that's very important to give you that history, to understand what I'm going to say now. Okay, this comes from the Gospel of Thomas, and I just want to read it, because it fits for those of you who attended Ernesto's talk this morning. It is being for others. This idea is that spirituality, God is within you. And that when you look to something outside of yourself, okay, as a regulator, you run into the problems of like, for example, marriage as a social remedy. Because you are acting for the goodness of God. In other words, it's not intrinsically motivating for some. Certainly not. Okay. It says, when you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, and the female not be female, then shall you enter the kingdom. Let me go on. Premise one. Marriage is a spiritual vehicle, not a social remedy. It provides valuable opportunities for recognizing a development of spiritual consciousness. Helminiak calls it, the unfolding toward spiritual unconsciousness in the service of recognizing one's essential nature, which is the oneness of God. Premise two. Bridal chamber tensions stem from unevaluated experiences of self as fundamentally different. This turns the bridal chamber from the spiritual to the mundane, a place of conventions and norms that act as religious, social, economic, and political expedients and regulators. 3, the spiritual bridal chamber contains the seeds, and now I move into my model and ideas, which is very Kierkegaardian. Contains the seeds of building up love in oneself. This is a necessary and sufficient condition and differs from building up love in the partnership. We know we've tried that, and we still divorce at a 50% rate. Okay, let's move on. In such a model, marital tension stems from unevaluated experiences of self and the other that polarize and misinform and cannot be used in the service of the spiritual. All right, so I give you my final last slide, which is just a brief introduction to my ideas of a model and a practice for this model. I want to begin, my ideas here come from Kierkegaard's works of love, with the idea of building love. And the idea briefly is this, that it's an assumption that in every person exists love. Not in a naive way. And that when you, and Kierkegaard is very, emphasizes strongly the rigorous duty, the effort to see love in the other, which comes from examining the places, examining your deeds, and do they come from love? That in itself is necessary and sufficient to awaken the love from the other. So the therapist, I'm going to use Kurt Schneider's term, through an existential sensibility, and I'm telling you what I do, and I'm going to wrap up with a brief example. Okay. I position myself to see the patient clearly, which many of you do. In particular, I avail myself to my client's invitations to locate in them experiences of love, invitations that they don't know about. By sensing completely, I point them to what is already there, what they want me to see. The emphasis of building up rather than fixing or repairing what's broken has the possibility of lifting the therapy situation as well as the couple above ordinary circumstance. I want to go to the next slide and I'll give you a little story. And then I'm done. Because the story will really be practical and highlighting everything I just said. Building up love in the client then, when people experience themselves as love themselves, they awaken to the rewards of love. They move from, in Alfred Langley's ideas of the fundamental existential motivations, I can't to I can be here. I do not want to live to I want to live because I like it. I cannot be myself to I allow myself to be fully. And I do not know why I'm here to I am here for the good of however we define it. These increased awakenings organize people passionately around a fundamental project that involves with love. The effort they apply to this existential task is the effort they put in, okay, are the rewards that they reap. This leads to increases in cognitive activities of being able to symbolize, imagine, categorize, and judge experience from Salvador Nadi along the lines of becoming love and recognizing the fruits of it. This then leads to a synthesis of the mundane and the spiritual. Let me tell you a brief little story with that. Okay, I'll try. I want to give a therapy situation to try to highlight. I've been treating a woman in therapy who came in saying that her husband announced that he wanted a divorce after 26 years. Mm-hmm. She told me after maybe 2 or 3 times that their Jehovah Witnesses have been very immersed in their religion and the culture of I thought to myself, good, because I love when someone has some kind of passion or something organizing them to something greater than themselves. I can work with them. Okay. So, and I'm not a good one, but she started to unfold the litany of, all the things that he had done to them and her two boys throughout the years. And let me just briefly tell you that they both came from very tough backgrounds. Both never knew their fathers. Okay. His mother died when he was young. Her mother had to go, she was a very young mother, went off and worked. Both were raised by their maternal grandparents who were very active alcoholics. So both came from extreme deficits and losses. And the religion, I think, helped to organize them to create a meaningful family. To make a long story short, she said that he complained throughout the years she was not affectionate, and that translated not only just into everyday human affection, but sexual relations. When she got through with her litany, I said to her, is there truth to what he says? And she said to me, partly. That was good. Okay. So throughout the sessions, I said, I need to meet him. So would he come in if I asked? So I brought him in, and he did come. Okay. To make a long story short, he did not want to be here. He felt it was cool. But my job was to continue treating her. She needed for me to see her pain, and I persisted in seeing her pain. But in every opportunity, when I saw love, I raised it, I labeled it. So, for example, she was, saying one day, he drinks a fifth of rum when he drives. Can you believe he's drinking in the car? Right? Now, I might get caught up and say, how terrible. But as she talked and I said, you must be very worried about me. I know that must be hard. He's not a terrible person, completely. And she was, because I knew that's what she felt. She said yes, and she would cry. I knew there was opportunities anytime I could look for love. Not to get them back together. That was not my job. My job was to heal her. And I knew she had to move from a being to being for others to free her. So let me summarize by saying, a lot of sessions of treatment, she came in just a couple of weeks ago. They were fighting over potential assets. She was a stay-at-home mom, but he insisted that everyone took from him throughout the years. And he was demanding an accounting of what she does on a daily basis versus his in terms of dollars. She, of course, resisted this. We understand why. But finally, after therapy, after we had worked on this issue and she was evolving, she said to me, I told John, he called and I said, I have an accounting for you. And he said, you know what, it really doesn't matter to me. She said, I know that. But I want you to have the accounting because I want you to know how much you did for all of us. And none of us could have done what you did. And I want you to move. She did not do that because she wants them back, because they were already well into the relationship. She then started talking about she can make it. She was, that sense of awe that Kirk Schneider talks about. What had changed? Nothing. She was getting divorced. What had changed was being for others. She saw him in herself, and she was able to help.